I get a lot of personal messages, every week from believers. On rare occasions, they may be thoughtful, respectful, even sincere, contemplative, curious. And maybe once a year, I'll get one like that. Otherwise, they're all usually like this one.
You've said that you want evidence outside the Bible as proof of authenticity. 70,000 people saw the sun move in the sky at Fatima. There was a wide variety of people there that day: doctors, lawyers, policemen. Many were trained observers and investigators. What kind of bullshit excuse do you have for not believing it?
I replied to this guy saying that I'd never heard of this alleged miracle. I had to Google it to see what he was talking about. And now that I know, now I can answer. Why don't I believe it? Well, for one thing, the reported event is impossible. And I know miracles are supposed to be impossible, but this one is so completely ridiculous that it would still be impossible even for a God. Even if it was a miracle, it still doesn't work for reasons that we'll get into in a moment. But ultimately, whatever happened at Fatima does not serve as evidence of the Bible. The church already existed before the Bible did, before mere fallible men wrote down the fables they made up and put them into a book of their favorite folklore. Whatever happened at Fatima, whatever people claim to have seen, we still know for certain that the global flood of Noah's Ark never happened. We can prove that. We know that men were already speaking different languages around the world before the time of the alleged Tower of Babel. And it seems that the Exodus never happened either. And apparently Moses never even existed. He was a composition or a composite of a handful of both factual and fictional characters. Adam and Eve certainly never existed. The Garden of Eden is obviously just a fable influenced by elder pagan mythology, whose only possible truth is as a metaphorical interpretation. Not even the existence of God would change any of that. So it really doesn't matter what the people thought they saw in the sky at Fatima, Portugal. The Bible is still wrong on almost all, if not every, important point that it tries to make.
A few years ago, I read one of the most insane things I ever heard of. Some idiot wrote a book claiming that the crowd at Fatima were having a collective hallucination. Except for the fact that in the whole history of man, no group of people have ever had the same hallucination.
Yes, they have, and it is usually a religious experience. I've had shared visions as a neo pagan spiritualist. Many others have too. George Harrison, for example, famously said that he and John Lennon shared the visions of Krishna consciousness as proof of their God. They said that if one chants the mantras with devotion, then you can actually obtain God perception, that you can actually see God and hear Him, play with Him. That it might sound crazy, but He's actually there, actually with you. And while you, as a Christian, may think you agree with that at first, remember that Harrison was a Hindu. And when he says that he and John Lennon could see God, they're talking about a different God than yours. They were able to see a character that you don't believe in. They saw what both you and I agree does not exist. Every religion has that ability, where a whole group of people can collectively see what is not there, because faith is inherently autodeceptive.
Every psychiatrist knows groups of people don't have the same hallucinations.
So you're now speaking as a representative of every psychiatrist, yet you are not any psychiatrist. And I have to wonder why it is that the American Psychological Association's Dictionary of Psychology says that the spontaneous outbreak of atypical thoughts, feelings, or actions in a group or social aggregate may manifest either as psychological illness, also better known as mass hysteria, or as collective hallucinations, which is what we're talking about now, and which I note is most often seen in religious services, whether Christian or pagan or what have you. Look at how some Christians dance around like they're possessed or fall over themselves pretending to be healed, even when they walk out of the church with the same illnesses they came in with. And look how South Asian pagans perform these amazing bloodless rituals on the excuse that they've been somehow empowered by their preferred gods or spiritual ancestors. I also know from personal experience that, when I was a neo pagan occultist, that when you have a group of faith believers psyched up to see something, at least some of them are probably going to say that they saw it, believing that they saw it, even if it wasn't really there and it didn't really happen. I know because it happened to me too. That's why I gave up faith. I realized I was fooling myself. And so, if you want to pursue truth, the first thing you have to do is abandon your faith. If, truth matters more to you than whatever you'd rather believe.
This idiotic explanation had to be invented to explain away a very obvious problem for atheists. It's like it says in the Bible. Even if one should rise from the dead, they still would not believe.
Well, be fair. We need something better than unreliable sources making unverifiable claims about impossible absurdity. And that's why astronomer Carl Sagan said that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. What's that mean? Well, if you tell me that you met Taylor Swift, okay, I can probably take your word for that. But if you say that she's your fiance, then no, your word alone will no longer suffice. The more improbable the claim, the more profoundly compelling the evidence supporting that claim must be.
Hello! If you want to read accounts of Fatima, I suggest you go to the Catholic website EWTN and read accounts of the eyewitnesses there.
I will look into the source claims, of course, but I also look for secular, sane, objective analyses of it too, trying to minimize or eliminate biases to fairly compare perspectives to see whether there is any actual truth there.
Whatever website you were on sounds like a secular website which adds things which weren't in the original accounts to explain away things they can't account for.
That, of course, is not true. The story is that the Virgin Mary appeared to these three little children, only 10 years old or younger, and told them the same sort of vague prophecies that every would be prophet talks about, oncoming wars and rumors of wars and that sort of thing, and all the local specific stuff that was going on at the time. And forecasting, future tells about that. But why is it that God only grants a private audience and then only to the least credible people available, and then leaves it up to them to play telephone with the rest of the community? That has always proved to be a bad move, but God will not correct his mistakes or improve upon that strategy.
I have no respect for atheists because they always make the following false claims. They either claim, one, a prophecy was invented after the event took place, and two, they twist, pervert, and deny the facts as you do. The visionaries at Fatima predicted the event well in advance. They gave a specific day and time the miracle would take place, and it did. All accounts mention the same sequence of events. A crowd gathered, it was cloudy, the sun moved in the sky, etc. Only atheists who don't want to look at the eyewitness testimony consider it to be an illusion. They know they can't explain it, so they simply ignore it. It was an illusion. We understand.
You understand nothing whatsoever. I did listen to eyewitness testimony. Most of them were in text, which I read, but there was one that I can share on video. And you even agreed that that one is consistent with everyone else's eyewitness testimony. This guy.
When we get on the cover, I see the soldiers try to stop us to get down in the cover. Everything was wet. It was a good 3 inches of water and mud, everything in the ground. I was, I say, between 7,500 feet from the hill and from the tree.
The ignorant, belligerent twit in my email sent me a few different threads of emails, the long string. The conversation went way, way further than it should. And he was repeating the same points or queries in random, meandering, repetitive fashion. So I'm going to try to stitch that conversation together for my audience a little more consistently and succinctly, maybe out of order, but in a way that makes a bit more sense than how it came to me.
Let's start with your question. What else can it be other than an atmospheric inversion? The most obvious explanation is that it was a true miracle of God, as the visionaries said it was.
One of several problems with that is that one source said that there was as many as 70,000 people there, but another source says that there was more than 70,000 people there, and another one said that there was less than half that many. The only consistent report is that reports are inconsistent. Some people said they saw the sun do different things. The rest didn't notice anything unusual at all. And nobody got a picture of this thing. I mean, we're shown this highly dubious photograph, but it's obviously fake because here is what I think is the same picture, except that the sun isn't visible in this one, at least not to the camera, apparently because the cloud cover is too heavy.
At first, no one believed the three children, not even the Catholic Church. The Virgin Mary promised a specific day and time the miracle would take place, and it did take place on that day and time.
My experience with religious zealotry leads me to suspect that whatever happened because a whole bunch of credulous gullah believers gathered with their goal being a desperate emotional need to see a miracle. And in that moment, they just needed someone to tell them where to look and what to see. Then, if the believer has enough faith, they will see it.
For it to be an atmospheric inversion, the three children would have to be expert astronomers and mathematicians to predict the day and time it would take place.
If it's an atmospheric condition, then it's up to meteorologists, not astronomers. Let me remind you that the sun is 93 million miles away. So it doesn't have anything to do with weather conditions isolated in Fatima, Portugal. But the atmosphere that people look through to see the sun can cause all the effects that they're talking about. And witnesses even reported that it was a change in the atmosphere.
Around noontime, they saw some change in the atmosphere. They could see that something different was happening. Lucia shouted, "Look at the sky." And that was when the miracle of the sun began.
Yes, thousands of people saw the sun change color and rotate on its axis. They all agree on the major details.
If the sun was spinning, how would you know? I mean, you're staring into the sun. It's not like you can see its geography passing by. You can't see any detail at all, not without a hell of a telescope and a whole lot of filters. But if this photo is meant to represent what it looked like to the naked eye, then I suggested that perhaps some of these people got a precise view looking through a high-level vortex, maybe like a sort of tornadic rotation that never touched down. Maybe that could explain this effect, because not only are they supposedly seeing this spiral, but witnesses reported that the sun looked unusually dim, as it would if you were looking at it through the clouds. And they just experienced a violent storm, and then witnesses reported a sudden gust of very strong wind.
The wind started to blow pretty hard, real hard.
That too would make sense if you're beneath a funnel rotation. They get tornadoes in Portugal. And the guy who reported the strong wind said that it dried his clothes and the water on the ground. But the ignorant, belligerent twit in my email made fun of me for believing that blow dryers work. I've ridden my motorcycle through heavy rain and then through the wind after. I know full well how fast high wind can dry your clothes.
Another bullshit explanation by atheists to explain away what they don't understand.
Remember, I didn't know anything about this yet. I didn't know what it was. But even giving the benefit of the doubt, I know that whatever it was, if it was real in any way at all, then it had to be an atmospheric condition, because what else could explain this discoloration and distortion that's only seen in Fatima and nowhere else? Not in Lisbon, not in Madrid, not in Morocco, nor indeed anywhere else in the world. You know, if this had actually happened to the sun, the whole sunny side of the earth should have been able to see it too, right? It should have been visible from the eastern seaboard of the US down to Cuba and Brazil and the whole continents of Europe and Africa to as far east as India. But no, this effect was only visible through the clouds in Fatima, Portugal. That means that it can only be a weather-related illusion. because we know that the sun itself isn't actually doing anything different that day.
The phenomenon was visible 50 to 75 miles away from Fatima. Natural or not, it was visible over a wide area. Like other atheists, you make things up to suit your views. Thanks for brightening up my day. I had a good laugh at hearing it wasn't visible on the other side of town. Like everything else, you make up facts to suit yourself. Thanks again. I was feeling depressed, but now I'm in a better mood after reading that idiotic statement. Many eyewitnesses there saw the sun change color, rotate on its axis, and move towards the earth. Many people were afraid the sun would crash into the earth and thought that it was the end of the world.
Vincente, what's happening?
It's the end of the world.
And the sun started breaking. And then the sun started roll, like dancing from one place to another place. And then we see the sun come towards where the shield and where the tree.
The sun! Look at the sun, it's falling!
And we see the sun come right into the tree. And the sun, about a minute or so, and the sun started rolling back again the way it commands.
Look! The sun is turning back!
Okay. At this point, I changed my hypothesis from maybe the people were looking through some sort of cloud rotation to maybe they weren't looking at the sun at all, because the witnesses said that the sun looked much dimmer than it usually does. So you could look at it easily without burning your eyes. And they said that it both looked and behaved completely different than it normally does, dancing around all weird in a way that, the actual sun absolutely cannot do. And that it's bouncing lights everywhere in weird colors. And then the sun came down below the clouds and went into the trees for a minute or two. And then it wandered or danced its way back into the clouds. And then when the clouds parted again, when the sky was clear and the weather was over, then the sun appeared the way it normally does. So at this point, I'm wondering whether these people maybe saw ball lightning. I mean, I'm not sure that ball lightning is even real, but witnesses say that it's anywhere from 8 inches to 8 feet in diameter, and that it's typically lasts only 3 or 4 minutes, and that it can wander around in exactly the way that this guy is describing what he thinks is the sun.
I have no respect for atheists because they always make the following false claims. They either claim, 1, a prophecy was invented after the event took place, and 2, they twist, pervert, and deny the facts as you do.
Except that I didn't do any of that. Instead, I granted the benefit of the doubt and assumed that maybe some of these people actually saw something rare and noteworthy.
If God can move the sun, he can suspend the other laws of nature, like keeping the sun from burning up the earth from its tremendous heat.
The sun didn't move. After repeatedly pressuring this myopic mental maladroit to get a straight answer, I got him to admit that he's not a flat earther, he's not a geocentrist. He said that he understands that this illustration is basically a correct depiction of our solar system, that the sun is a star in the center, and that it's bigger, way bigger than all the other planets combined, and that the Earth and all the other planets orbit around it. I told him that the sizes aren't accurate, because in this image, if the planets were to scale, They'd all be too small to recognize and too distant to show in the picture as well because they're all really far apart. I told him that the sun is more than 100 times bigger than the Earth and that it's 8 minutes away at light speed. So the idea that the entire solar system abruptly disbanded momentarily so that the sun could shoot over to the Earth at faster than light speed, looking like it's getting bigger on the approach, but actually shrinking faster than it moves, so that it ends up so tiny that it can hide in a tree, is an insane thing for a full-grown adult to believe. And yet I know he believes it because all these other people believe it too. I mean, according to all the sources I've seen on this thing, they all put the duh in dumbass. This isn't just a stupid thing to believe, stupid with two O's. This is a crazy thing to believe. And yet people do. Well, not everyone there was so cognitively crippled because a lot of them failed to mention having seen this tiny low wattage star playing, jumping around in the treetops like a monkey. Several of them remained sane and sensible. So how can that be?
When a miracle happens, it only happens to a particular person in a particular place. This would explain why it wasn't seen in other parts of the earth. In the Christian world of miracles, it's a well-known phenomenon that some people are able to see visions and others don't. Why this happens, I don't know. It's thought that God may not allow some people to see visions because of their lack of faith.
Ah, so I was right. You can only see it through faith, meaning that you have to already believe it before you can see it, which means that you didn't really see it because it didn't really happen. The sun stayed where it is, doing exactly what it does. It's just you guys are pretending that the sun is doing something it's not. And therefore, by definition, and now your own admission, it is only an illusion.
The fact that some people didn't see it doesn't invalidate the testimony of thousands of others. Hallucination is a bullshit explanation. You too, Aaron? You should learn something about psychiatry.
I suggest you see a psychiatrist. I never said it was a hallucination. I said it was an illusion because I tried to give the benefit of the doubt and that maybe these people actually saw something extraordinary, that they weren't just making it up like you now unwittingly admit that they were.
One woman there was a Muslim. She also happened to be a medical doctor. She was absolutely astonished at what she saw. She had no faith at all, since she was a believer in the Prophet Muhammad. How did she happen to hallucinate the same type of phenomenon everyone else did?
Because she had faith in God too, just another different version of God than you do. You remember, in her religion, Muhammad showed people how he could break the moon in half. And nobody actually saw that, but we're supposed to believe that even though the moon is still in one piece. And now you've got your homeboy over here saying that the sun was breaking, except it's still in one piece too. So you and the Muslim lady, you guys are still on the same page. You're still looking up the sky and seeing whatever you want to see and get a kick out of it, have a good time. That's the way faith works. I once saw Glenn Beck speaking to an audience of evangelicals, and he got them all excited about the prophecies in 3rd Nephi. They didn't understand that if they believe in the prophecies in the Book of Mormon, that makes them Mormon. But, believers are not known for their strong command of logic, reason, or rationality.
You asked what good would this do? The Virgin Mary told the children that God did the miracle so that more people would believe.
But you also said that you already have to believe it to see it. And you said that God only lets some people see it. So even if your God was real, he doesn't want us all to believe. He wants some of us to go to hell for not believing. And it was his choice, not ours, which of us that would be. Good thing your God and his hell are not really real. If he was real, then I should expect a whole lot better demonstration than this flimsy, give us a sign crap. If your God is real, trot him down here to talk to us, all of us at once, not just one of us alone.
Like I said before, you don't want evidence of miracles. All you want to do is argue and tell everyone else they're wrong.
I just want people to be honest. Stop claiming hearsay as if it was a fact. Stop pretending to know things you don't know. You don't know what I think or why. Learn to assume less and inquire more. Then you won't be so wrong about everything all the time.
Mary also predicted the outbreak of World War II and the rise of atheism in Russia. That's a matter of record, long before it came to pass. Of course, atheists aren't interested in checking facts. If they were, they wouldn't be atheists.
No, that's how we became atheists. We read the Bible and we saw that it says things that we know are not true. For example, the Bible says that the sun once stopped and stood still in the sky for a while. But that's because the people who wrote those stories didn't know what anything was nor how anything worked. They thought that the earth was a flat disk and that the sun was just this little light in the expanse of a giant crystal dome called the firmament. But now we know there is no firmament. And the sun doesn't go around the earth. It's the other way around. I mean, sure, the people who wrote the Bible thought that the sun was the same size as the moon, but that too is just an illusion caused by the fact that the sun is both 400 times bigger than the moon and 400 times further away too, which is why everything you're talking about now would be impossible even for your God, and I must add, absurd for your God to even consider.
And by the way, you're wrong about every single thing you say about the Bible on your ridiculous show. The people you have on this program know nothing about the Bible. They just make error after error like you do.
Yeah, I got an email from somebody. We were talking just before we started recording about the Fatima miracle, and I needed to point out that somebody had asked me about this miracle that went on in Portugal in like 1907 or whatever it was, where reportedly 70,000 people saw the sun dance in the sky. Mm-hmm. And this same person, when I tried to tell him that this has to be an atmospheric condition, that's all it can be, when I tried to explain to him why the sun itself cannot have been taken all its mass and go this way at this ridiculous speed and then suddenly reverse to go to this other direction at this ridiculous speed. Let's just take the physics out of that. And let's also remember that this was only visible in one tiny little village in Portugal, not the rest of the planet. Nobody else saw this. So if they saw anything at all, if Madonna existed and predicted anything, if any prophet predicted that this event was going to happen to these 70,000 people actually saw it, then clearly Madonna knew that it was a regional specific illusion created by an atmospheric effect. It would not be the sun actually dancing around. And the guy had a meltdown back at me. That was the response. Wherein he said of this team, of y'all, he said that absolutely everything you say about the Bible is wrong. All of you.
Oh, man, I made a mistake studying for a decade. Damn.
I know. And I mean, look at Chip coming and actually, looking at, translating the words himself, studying the Hebrew to that point. Clearly, we're all just pulling this out of our ass. I didn't spend decades studying this from 6 different angles within the faith. No.
In Fatima, on the day of the miracle, there was an atheist in the crowd. Actually, there were several. This man was mocking the believers, telling them what simpletons they were for believing in miracles, how stupid they were, etc. Sound familiar? Once the sun began moving towards the earth, he fell down to the ground, crying in a loud voice for God to save him. He was confessing his sins out loud, telling God how sorry he was for his sins, etc.
Yeah, I hear this kind of bullshit conversion story often. It's usually obviously a lie that is either unsubstantiated or it's actually contradicted. That's how it was when Lady Hope lied about being Darwin's nurse when he had a deathbed confession, discarding belief in his theory of evolution. except that Darwin's grown children were there at his bedside at that time, and they said that Lady Hope had never been there at all, that they'd never even met her.
Funny how an illusion can cause a man to convert from atheism to a believer in an instant.
Funny how none of these type claims can ever be verified, but can often be disproved if we can contact the actual person in question. That's how it was at SatanCon, when evangelists outside were reporting on YouTube that they had converted like dozens of Satanists who were still partying inside the convention and laughing at the dishonesty of the believers outside.
A few atheists were saved that day, along with some Hindus and Muslims. Praise be to God for saving them from Satan's kingdom of darkness.
Come into the light of reason, and we can show that we're the ones who actually have the truth on our side. We're the ones who still care about the truth, even when it hurts.
What happened at Fatima that day was never recorded anywhere else in the world, not even 3,000 or 4,000 years ago among the Greeks and Romans.
Yes, it was recorded elsewhere. In fact, since 1981, this exact miracle has been reported so often in the village of Medjugorje, Bosnia, that it's become a recurrent festival. Catholic pilgrims from all over the world have been coming here to see the sun dance. It doesn't even matter what the weather conditions are. If you came here to see it, and you're really hoping to see it, and you have faith enough to see it, then you're going to see it. Even if your camera can't see it, because your camera's an atheist.
Look at that, all the people are looking at it. See, they're filming it. They all see it. Yeah, look at that, they're all filming it. The spinning sun, look at that. It's amazing. See. I don't know if I can get it on the camera. I don't have such a good camera, but it's pulsating. Spinning. You can see it, it's spinning. Yeah? You speak English? No? Espagnol? Italiano. Tu has visto il miracolo del sole, no?
Questo è il miracolo del sole.
È il miracolo del sole.
Non è proprio questo, non è proprio questo il miracolo del sole. Il miracolo del sole che è stato a Fatima è il sole che comunque si avvicina alla persona, si è avvicinato a tutte le persone. E io l'ho vissuto anche qua.
Questo è
Questo è il sole.
È il sole che è il miracolo del sole, no? Tu lo vedi también. Grazie. So she's from Italy, she's seeing it as well. The sun is spinning. It's amazing to see. I don't know if I can capture it on the camera. And look at all the people there watching it. It's amazing. Come to Medjugorje, check it out. It's amazing to see when it's spinning.
Pope Francis even commented about this, saying that the people at Medjugorje see this according to their faith. He says that their faith is personal, and that's why only they can see what everyone everywhere else is unable to see, but would be able to see if it was really happening, because it's not really happening, and it never happened. It's all in your imagination, and even the Pope knows it.
Of course, you never bothered reading any eyewitness accounts, which is pretty much what I expected. The real question is this: how did 3 illiterate peasant kids predict a solar event no one else did?
They didn't. It wasn't a solar event. Thousands of believers were promised a miracle and didn't know what it was until someone said, "Look at the sun." And then these uneducated flat earthers imagined the rest, just as we see pilgrims to Medjugorje still doing to this day. Because faith is all about fooling yourself to make believe what you know cannot be and is not really true.
Why did God choose this particular area for a miracle?
Because Medjugorje was already booked for an exorcism that weekend?
Because Mary told them unless men turned from sin, another great war would break out. She was referring to World War II, of course.
Or so you assume, though other sources list other options. But that doesn't in any way explain why God should create such a stupidly pointless and entirely imaginary light show for flat earth farmers in this particular podunk village. All it shows is that your God doesn't really see the future. If this happens, then that will happen, because God doesn't know whether this will happen.
She also said that Satan has blinded men's minds to the truth, and that particularly applies to you. I would urge you to find a prayer group and have them pray to loosen the grip evil has on your mind.
Instead of a prayer group, why don't you write down the prayer on a piece of paper and send it off to Santa instead? That'll be just as effective.